What's going on? This is Zach Adelstein here with DFS Army, and today I'm here with Aaron Friedman, and we're going to be going over the Week 4 college football main slate on DraftKings, and we'll have a few plays for FanDuel as well. It's interesting. It's already been basically a third of the way through the season after this week, if you're counting that Week 0 slate. 5 weeks in, we've learned a lot about a lot of these teams, and this is a really interesting slate. Not a ton of top-end quarterbacks, some other places to really target. And yeah, how's your week been, Aaron?
Not too bad. Been doing a lot of looking at the betting side and excited to crank out some sheets for the weekend.
Awesome. Yeah, and yeah, I think why don't we just jump right in here? So yeah, going over this main slate, we're going to start at Mizzou at Auburn. It's an interesting game for some interesting reasons. TJ Finley's out now. Auburn is favored here by 7. There's a 52-point total. Last week we saw how Auburn can really look, and I think now Brian Harsin is fighting for a job. So it will be really interesting to see what comes this week. There's a few places I want to hit here. I do think Ryan Ashford is in play at 5K. He's a dual threat quarterback. And we saw last year Mizzou really struggled with dual threat quarterbacks, give up some huge games. Obviously, I don't want much of him. He's, if you're playing 150 lineups, he is, a 5%er there. But I do think he could, he gets you 20 DraftKings points here. It's a nice spot at 5K. The only other place I really like on this slate, I think, is Tank Bigsby. I think he's way too cheap here. He's going to get you 18 to 20 carries every week. Last week didn't do too much because they got down to Penn State so much. That's not the case here. This will be their first game against the conference game, their first game against an FBS team that they weren't getting blown out. I don't think Mizzou does that to them. And Mizzou, their only FBS game this year was against Kansas State, and they gave up 174 rushing yards to running backs. I just think this is a really nice spot for him. We know what he can do. He does have upside. And I think 6K is a little bit too cheap for him here. If you really want to, you can look at some of these Mizzou wide receivers. Lovett's had decent target share. I do think once he gets into SEC play, though, it's going to come down. I don't love Brady Cook too much personally, but that's just where I'm at. What are you thinking, Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. I like Ashford is interesting. He has a pretty good shot at getting you 20 points in you can't look at the last game because this is going to be a lot more competitive. And then I agree I had a lot of Bigsby last week, and I agree it's a really good spot to jump back because of the new starter, and I don't know, he's a good back. He's going to be the focal point of this offense in a competitive game. Yeah, and then not a lot. I know Burden's always a big play threat for Mizzou, but I don't know. He's kind of an okay play right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's a freshman. This is his first SEC game. I think it'll be a little bit tough for him. And then Lovett's been getting the bigger target share, but still, again, against Auburn, still have I don't think this Mizzou offense is up to the caliber of even Penn State, personally. But yeah, I mean, and the prices on them, they're a little bit expensive for what I really want for that Mizzou offense. Moving over here to Duke and Kansas, a basketball game that is actually a great football game this week. Made a big deal that game day is not there this week. Everyone's all mad. But I do think this could be a decent game, decent DFS game. The spread here, Kansas favored by 7.5, and the total 66.5. So there is that nice high total, which we always look for, and decent spread. Jalen Daniels has been pretty good. He's been very touchdown dependent, which is something I'm a little concerned about. Last week he had 5 touchdowns, 2 of them rushing. So that right there is, 24 of his 45 points. Only had 158 yards passing. Did have 123 yards rushing. That dual threat I really like. His price here doesn't look too bad. You look at the full slate, though. He is one of the most expensive quarterbacks on the slate for sure, which it feels gross to pay up for a Kansas quarterback. Really does. But I do think he has, some decent upside here. Actually, I really like the price on Riley Leonard here. Hasn't done too much, hadn't had to do too much throwing. Against North Carolina A&T, put up 12 points. Or put up 12, only had 12 throws, but had those rushing touchdowns, which really helped. Against Temple, had a decent day at 328 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. He's going to run the ball. I think he's going to run the ball here. Plenty. He's got that rushing upside. And it's 6K in the game that, that higher total. I really think he's a decent, cheap quarterback play for GPPs. Fading all of these running backs. Both of them have too much of a timeshare. Neal and Henshaw, you never really know who's going to get in there. Neal usually gets those touchdown touches, but it's kind of hard to predict that. And then Duke right now is really in a timeshare. One place I really want to look here at wide receiver is at Jalen Calhoun. He has 18 targets in their 2 FBS games, not counting their FCS game. And he's their number 1 receiver. Those 2 games, he, really went off 198 yards. Doesn't have a touchdown yet on the year. But, I think he's a decent price. I don't hate playing him in cash, and I like playing him in GPPs at this price. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I agree. The one thing I like about Daniels a lot is because he's expensive, that will keep the ownership down. But, I mean, he's playing as well as, he's playing as well as any QB. So, let's say if you put Dylan Gabriel on his game card, you'd play him at 7,900. So I have a lot of interest. Riley Leonard's really good. I'm excited to see him. I think in the Northwestern game, he didn't get to show all of his upside. So I think if he's running a lot and it's a competitive game, then he's going to pay off his salary. So I agree with you. I like Riley Leonard a lot. And then I'm also on Calhoun too. He's a good player. The rest of you can play Daniels naked because they really use a big rotation at receiver.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. All right, moving on to another big game, the highest total game on the slate. TCU at SMU, that Dallas rivalry. It's a really fun game usually. And this year's got a 70 total, and TCU's favored by 2 points at SMU right down the road. So it's really is an interesting game this year. I think both quarterbacks are in play. You have Tanner Mordecai, who is going to throw the ball a ton. Last week at Maryland, he threw the ball 54 times. Has 2 games over 360 yards, has 10 touchdowns on the year. Will run the ball some if he needs to. Last week, ran it a bit. And he's cheaper for me. The thing is, he's cheaper than Daniels. He's going to be much higher owned than Daniels. So, that's something to know. He's a great cash play for sure. But yeah, I just think he's going to throw it a lot. Duggan has that upside. He hadn't had to do much this year. They've played 2 games. They've blown out, both of their games that they've played. Against Tarleton State and then Colorado was just awful. He didn't play much against Colorado. That's where they started Max Morris, and he got hurt. But yeah, I think, he can air it out. They put it up when they needed to against Tarleton. And he's going to have to air it out here with this high total. I think both of them are in play. I think Miller is an expensive play. Kendra Miller, he hasn't gotten a ton of volume, but again, I don't think they've needed him. I do think they feed him a little bit more here. I think he gets 16 to 18 carries. SMU hasn't been a great run defense. So always in these higher total games, running backs can be in play. They can get in the end zone. I don't like paying up for him in these shootout situations, but I do think he's in play, and he has a ton of talent. Over at wide receiver, 2 main places I really want to look. Rossi Rice at 8,600. He's really expensive. He's one of the top plays on this slate. Has a 37% target share in a team that threw the ball 54 times last week. He has, around 45 targets through 3 games. He's going to get peppered. He can catch the ball. He's not one of these receivers that's going to get thrown to a lot and not catch it. Puts up a ton of yards, gets in the end zone. He does everything you want him to do. He's a great cash play. I think he's a great GPP play. He's expensive, but in this situation, he is. I think he's a great play. The other place I kind of like, I don't think Quentin Johnson's going to get a lot of attention just because he's expensive and hadn't done anything on the year. He's by far the best receiver on that team. He has a ton of talent. He's going to be an NFL wide receiver regardless of what happens this year. And if I can get him sub 10% ownership and he has a 35, 40 point, game, everybody else went up to Rice. And, he does. He has a 10 or 15 point game. I think I really get ahead on the field. And that's something that, it's kind of a pivot play that I really like here. In lineups that you don't have Rice, and lineups that you go other ways if you're stacking this game. What else do you see, Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. I think the SMU guys have more name recognition, but I like TCU to win the game. So I think there's a lot of value or ownership value on the TCU side, especially because Sonny Dykes recruited all the players to SMU, so he knows them all. I liked Duggan a lot in GPP just because he provides a good floor with his mobility. I do agree with Johnson too. He's an awesome player. And then Darius Davis, I think, is more for GPPs. He's a little, he has some upside, but also kind of a low floor, as you see with only 4 catches.
Definitely. I mean, they haven't thrown the ball a lot this year. They haven't had to. And they rotated all of their players into that Charleston State game to try to get Duggan some more reps under him before this SMU game. But yeah, I mean, I think you can, if you really want to, you can go through. There's several ways you can go with these receivers and just kind of throw them in there a little bit. I think the top tier is a little bit easier because all these mid-price guys are a little bit more expensive for low floor with so much of the volume, especially in SMU. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a really nice game to kind of tap into, especially the quarterbacks. Moving on to a game that I have a little bit interest in, not a ton, is Baylor at Iowa State. Iowa State's favored here by 2.5 at home, total of 46. Quarterbacks haven't done a lot, especially against Baylor. Deckers is cheap enough where if you really want to go there in GPPs, but I'd rather, if I'm going to do that, I'd rather, go down to Ashford and just pay 5,000 and get there. Against Iowa, he had 10 points. I think Baylor is a lot closer to Iowa than he is Southeast Missouri. So, kind of fading the quarterbacks there. I do have a ton of interest in Jarrell Brock. He didn't do much last game. They played Ohio. They blew him out. They didn't need him. But against Iowa, had 27 carries. He's going to have a ton of volume here. They love to run the ball. He's getting involved in the passing game, has 10 receptions on the year now. He's sitting there at 4,900, and there's not a ton of running back value on this slate. I think he's a great play here. The other guy that's way too cheap is Xavier Hutchinson. He has 39 targets on the year so far, on a 35% target share as well. He has at least 24 Draftkings points in every game. He's going to get peppered with targets here. He has great hands. We've seen his upside, and this is where they're throwing the ball all the time. So at 6,700, I think he's a great price for somebody that's going to get a ton of targets and has a ton of upside and really nice floor as well. But yeah, those are my main 2 plays here. What are you looking at?
Yeah, I like the quarterbacks are interesting. I think they both have talent. It's not the best matchup. I'm blanking on what the total is, but
total is 46.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Deckers and Shapen are worth having in your pool, but not like main lineup, or if you're making a few lineups, you don't need them. And then I agree on Brock. He's taken over for Breece Hall and looked really good. And yeah, Hutchinson, you referenced the target share. He's been awesome. Yeah, just a few pieces.
Yeah, there's not a ton. And with Baldwin out, no one else has really stepped up for Baylor. I kind of want to see what they're going to do. I'd rather, if you're going to play Shapen, I'd rather play him naked here than try to pick the correct receiver. And if Shapen does go off, you're kind of going to dud your lineup if you pick the wrong receiver.
Yeah.
So it's kind of where I am there. Going over to Clemson and Wake Forest. This is an interesting game for a couple of reasons to me. So Clemson's favored at Wake Forest by 7, and the total is 55.5. Sam Hartman, I've gone back and forth on. I am off of Sam Hartman here. The reason is he has played. This will be the fourth time that he has played Clemson, the third time he's played Clemson. Last two matchups, he's thrown the ball 64 times and he has one passing touchdown and one interception. He hasn't, he has I think 450 yards in those two games. Hasn't done a ton with it. He has the upside. I think you need him in your GPP pool. But I'm not going to go heavy on him, and I'm definitely not playing him in cash. This defense is made to stop this offense. This Clemson defense is made to stop this Wisconsin offense. They have that strong front seven. They have a good secondary, probably the best front seven in the country, or there with Georgia. And yeah, it's really hard for me to get on Wake Forest here when I think some people will, and I don't want to be over on them. As far as I'm not playing either of those quarterbacks, Hartman maybe, but I'm definitely not playing DJU. I would probably play Klubnik if he was starting, but he's not. Will Shipley, I think, is a really nice play here. Wake Forest given up over 5 yards carry on the year. They have not been good against the run. Shipley is has gotten a few carries. Is definitely the target share leader, the carry share leader. But he hasn't had to do anything. They've been in 3 blowouts. I think in a closer game, he's going to get much closer to 20 carries like we saw last year. And, he can put up, you saw last week, 12 carries for 139 yards. And it's long there with 32. So he's doing it on volume and not doing it on one big play. I think this is a really nice spot for him at a decent price. Wide receiver, 2 kind of places I'm looking. I do think Perry is still a GPP play. Even if Hartman doesn't put up all the volume, I think Perry is still going to get peppered. Clemson goes up here. I think he gets 15 to 18 targets. The other place, if you think that this game is going to be close, that I think is going to be very low owned, is Bo Collins. Bo Collins has led the team on the year with 15 targets. He has 5 every game. But again, they haven't had to do anything all year. If this game stays close, I could see a spot where Klubnik comes in, or they try to let DJU throw the ball more, whatever the case may be. And Klubnik has to get 8, 10, 12 targets here. And Collins has to get 8, 10, 12 targets. And he's not going to be – I don't think he's going to have 8%, 9% ownership. If I'd say more like 2 to 3%. So if you believe this spread, if you really think it's going to be a 7-point total or 7-point spread in this total, I do think Collins is in play. Again, I wouldn't go heavy on him, but that's just game theory and scripting out the game the way I think. None of the other Clemson receivers have really done much to kind of spread it out. But yeah, those are the 2 places I'm at receiver here. What are your thoughts on this game, Aaron?
Yeah, mostly I agree. I probably only want Shipley from this game. He's been awesome so far. He's had 2 touchdowns in every game. So I think it's a really nice spot because I bet on Clemson -7. So I think, he'll be a big part of that. And he's been pretty efficient with his carries. And this should be a pretty close game. So he should get closer to 20 carries here. Yeah, not a great game. Definitely want to be under the field on Wake Forest.
Yep, I agree completely. Moving on to Maryland and Michigan. Another interesting game. Maryland's going to Michigan. Michigan's favored by 16.5 at a 65 point total. JJ McCarthy is starting now with McNamara done, or backup, whatever you want to relegate him to. And McCarthy's interesting. I really want to see more from him before I really go in. He didn't do much last week, didn't have a touchdown. Team still wants to run the ball more, even though McCarthy is a much better quarterback than McNamara. So I want to, before I'm paying up to that's one of the most expensive QBs on this slate, I'm going to wait to see it. Tala, he really struggled last year against better defenses, and this is one of those. He was one of those that against bad defenses he was great, and against good defenses he was awful. So I'm going to fade him here as well, even though I do think they're going to have to air it out a little bit. Blake Corum hasn't had to get a ton of volume, just like Shipley hadn't, but this is literally one of the worst non-conference schedules I've ever seen. I think those are 3 of the worst 5 teams in the country right now. So they haven't had to do anything. I do think he gets closer to that 20-22 carries a game like he had last year, and like they like to give their top running backs. And I think this could be a 30-35 point game for him for sure. At receiver, there's not much I really like. If you really want to play Michigan wide receiver, Ronnie Bell's the one to do it. I don't go to Johnson. Every once in a while, they have one that hits and goes off and goes crazy, but I don't like playing roulette and trying to figure out which one besides Bell, who is by far the most talented. I think for the spot, the Maryland wide receivers are also too expensive. Maybe if you wanted to go with Copeland or Jones, if you thought maybe they were going to step up here. But yeah, that's kind of where I am here. The main place I'm really looking at is Blake Corum. Where are you going, Aaron?
Yeah, I like McCarthy because if you're high on him and you think he's really good, then it's a fair price. Like he could be 7,700 a lot this season, so I think it's a buy low spot that I'm interested in GPPs. Because if he does well, because it's on the Fox noon game, everyone's gonna know to play him the next week. Yeah, running back Corum's definitely interesting. I don't mind pairing Corum and McCarthy as your stack and then locking in a lot of the touchdown equity here. Yeah, I agree with the receivers that it's kind of roulette. On the Maryland side, I'm off of, as much as I love the Maryland receivers, Talia's really struggled against like Ohio State and Michigan. I just looked it up. Talia passed for like 178 yards and a touchdown last year versus Michigan. So I think they're all kind of priced up right now. And how much is Hemby? He's pretty impressive, but
Hemby's been decent, but he's sitting at 6,400, and that's just too much for me against this. It's a good front seven.
Yeah, probably just not McCarthy and Corum for me. Yeah.
The other thing I want to watch for is Donovan Edwards back. There's been some reports this week about his health and if he might be coming back sooner than later. If he's in at 5K, I think he's a really nice GPP spot in this game. It could get 8 to 10 carries. Moving on, going to Central Michigan at Penn State. This is one of the few Power 5 Group of 5 games that's interesting for blowout factor here. Penn State's favored by 28 with a total of 63. I'm not touching anyone at CMU, obviously, with that total. Sean Clifford's most expensive quarterback on the slate at 8,300. At first, you think about it, I want to fade him. Last week, I think he was 5,800. To take that 2,500 jump is hard. But this is a good spot, kind of digging into it. Central Michigan's one of the worst teams against the pass this year. They are they just haven't done well against the pass. That being said, if you look into it, against Ohio a couple weeks ago, they just really didn't do much on offense. They blew them out, but they didn't let their starters play like a half. I could see this being a similar game here. 46-10, 42-10, something like that. And their starters just don't get a ton of time, and you're stuck with 20 fantasy points. And even though he's not that expensive, if I want, if I'm going for the most expensive quarterback, I want 30 plus fantasy points on the slate. So that's kind of where I'm at with Clifford. Going over, there is the one piece I did actually like on Central Michigan is Lou Nichols. The reason I like Lou Nichols here is just his volume. Against Oklahoma State, they were being blown out. It was 44-15, I think, at one point, or 50, 44, 46
Yeah.
around there. And they still fed him. They gave him 26 carries. He didn't his average just sucked against some of these teams, but he's getting volume. Last week he got 30 carries against Bucknell against an FCS team. They're going to give him the ball. So I don't think he'll be high owned. And if he could get the 2 touchdowns that they score, then who cares if they get blown out if he's getting some production. Wide receiver's hard. One other place is Singleton. I think he's going to get very popular, but he's not getting volume. Like, I think people see the highlights. He looks really good. He's a great running back, but they're not giving him volume. He has 9, 10, and 10 carries. He had a great drive last week where I think they gave him the ball 3 times in a row, and he went 58 yards and scored a touchdown. And that's great that he's getting this. I do think he's a GPP play, but for 6,400, I want more volume than that. And I think in GPPs he's a really nice play. For cash, it's something that I'm going to stay away from for sure. Wide receiver, it's really hard because all of their volume has kind of gone down week after week. I think Lambert Smith is at a decent price here, but he hasn't done anything with it. Tinsley's the only one that's really done anything. So I'm probably going to fade these wide receivers. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at here. Clifford, I'll have some Clifford and GPPs, have some Lou Nichols and Singleton and GPPs, and then it's probably it. Where are you looking at?
Yeah, I like Nichols a good amount. And then for Central Michigan, I also like the tight end, Joel Wilson. I could see. I think it's a good price under 4K. Yeah, I mean he's not like a insane play, but I think he's
a good play. Good value.
He's interesting. Yeah, I agree. Not a lot on the Penn State side I want to target.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I think they put up a lot of points, but I just don't know really where they come from outside of Clifford if you want to go there in GPPs. I think one of my favorite games of the day is this Florida at Tennessee. I do think Florida bounces back at some point this year and takes out someone that no one thinks they will. But yeah, looking at this game, a few places to look. Hooker might be my favorite play on the slate. He's going to do a ton. He's going to get his 10 carries and 30 to 40 passes. He does everything, and he's not too expensive here. I think this could be your 9K quarterback easy. Richardson is a GPP pivot for me that I don't think many people want to go back to. He has 2 games in a row of single-digit DraftKings points. He's been awful. He just really hasn't done anything. But I think he's going to have to do something here. They're going to get blown out. It's kind of the way it is. So he's someone I look at as kind of a pivot that I think will be low owned. That we've seen his upside. We saw his upside against Kentucky, who I think is a much worse defense than Tennessee. Now they are going to Tennessee, so it's a little bit different. But then we go over here to running back. There's nothing I want here. They're just Tennessee can't pick a guy. They're mixing and matching way too much. So over at wide receiver, this is the place that is interesting to me on the slate. If Tillman is out here, which I've read reports that they're leaning towards that, I love Jalen Hyatt, and I really want to get some pieces of Brew McCoy. Hyatt at 6,800, I think, instantly becomes cash relevant. I think he's going to get double-digit carries here, and just is at a nice spot in a decent game. And Brew McCoy, I think, is a great GPP play that can get you some upside. That hasn't done much on the year, but he does have talent. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's an exciting game. It's an interesting game. What are you looking at?
Yeah, Hooker's awesome, and the offense, you can't go wrong with pieces from the Tennessee offense here. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about Richardson much before you brought him up, but yeah, I think a lot of the field isn't thinking about him, so that makes him interesting. A cheap running back or like flex if you need close to minimum is Trevor Etienne, the Travis's younger brother. He's been I played him more on FanDuel because he scored the past 2 games, but still here it's he's gotten 11 and 12 fantasy points for basically minimum salary. So yeah, you'll be frustrated though because this running back room's kind of a mess. Johnson gets work and Wright gets work, but um, I think if it's a blowout, because ETN's a freshman, he's more likely to get like some garbage time. So I don't know. He's interesting for last guy in, but otherwise, not crazy about the running backs.
Nope, I agree. And then, yeah, receiver, I think you can go. I don't want to touch anyone at Florida, like I
Yeah.
said, but I think Hyatt McCoy. Going on to Texas at Texas Tech. Another fun game for me, especially. Texas favored by 6.5 at Tech, and total is 60 here. Um, Texas, the news that I know at Texas is they're taking all 4 quarterbacks. All 4 quarterbacks are expected to dress, and that's as far as they will go in talking. This all 4 quarterbacks dressed last week, so it's no different than last week. But yeah, it's just kind of one of those things that Ewers is closer than he is not. He practiced all week, so I think eventually, this week, next week, he will be back. Um, Assuming he's out, though, for now, I'm not touching Hudson Card. Donovan Smith, I think, is great upside in this offense. You know, didn't have the best week at NC State, but is still going to throw the ball a ton, especially if they're from behind. This game is a wonky game every year. It always plays to the over. I think 6 out of the last 7 years they've gone over 70 points. Last 2 years it's gone over 100 points each game. So it's just one of those games that just always plays up. Um, so Donovan Smith, I think, is going to air it out here. Bijan Robinson is another one, probably my top running back play on the slate. Between him and Ibrahim, but at the price, he is by far. If yours is back, he actually to me takes a little bit of a hit, just because I don't think he gets the volume. But I do think that could help him in a fact that they're going to have to cover those throws a lot more. It's going to open some holes for him. Taj Brooks is decent for me. Texas hasn't had the best running defense on the year. But Brooks doesn't always get the volume. Last week he got 4 carries. The week before he got 18. So it's kind of throwing a dart, trying to pick which week who's going to get the carries there. Over wide receiver, I think Worthy is always a GPV play. He hasn't done much on the year, though. That being said, when Ewers comes back, I'm loading up on Worthy because we saw that connection in the first quarter of that Alabama game. And if he keeps going down in price, I'm just going to load up when Ewers is back. Miles Price finally led the team in targets last week. It's finally starting to get involved like he was supposed to all year. He's at a nice price here. He's a GPP play for me. And then for some reason, they refused to price up Jiren Bradley, who did not have a good week last week, has done great since the first week, but he is a target leader still. I believe he has 22 targets on the year, and has big upside. They're gonna pepper him even with those 2 catches. I think he had 7 targets last week. So yeah, that's kind of where I am at here. Where are you looking?
Yeah, I like the tech guys for GPPs. I'm willing to throw out the NC State stuff because I like their defense and they came to play. So I think I'm expecting a better outing from Smith, and I like Price and Bradley a lot for yeah, they have some nice pieces, and as you said, it's usually a high total every year. So I like the mostly Bijan and then the Texas Tech guys for me.
Yep, I like that for sure. Moving on to Notre Dame at UNC. UNC's favored here by 2, and total is 56. Starting quarterback, I like Drake May here. I think he's too cheap, under 7,000. We've seen what he can do with that dual threat ability. Had a big game. Appalachian State's not on here. Had a huge game against Appalachian State. Obviously against Florida A&M, he had a big game. Didn't have to do anything. Didn't have to do too much against Georgia State. They ran the ball a lot more there, and that was actually a tougher game for them. But I do think this is a decent spot for him for GPPs. Few places I really like here at running back for GPPs. So I think for cash, Chris Tyree and Austin or Audric Estime. Listen to the broadcast last week and tried to get that. They're both in play. They had 17 and 18 carries last week. Both had touchdowns. I think either one of them, I wouldn't necessarily playing them together. That being said, some of the top GPP winning lineups that week one were teams put together with both of the App State running backs. So there is a scenario where you could play them together in a few lineups. The only place I really want to go at UNC at running back is Hampton. He is still that top guy. He is a monster and is going to be for years to come. And everyone will know who he is. He's the next Trevion Henderson, Bijan Robinson. So, 5,500, I don't mind that at all. Then going over to wide receiver, Josh Downs is back. He announced today on his Twitter that he is back. That being said, he is the second most expensive wide receiver on this slate. This is a tough game, and I don't know if he's 100%. I don't know if he's not 100%. He, I'm sure, wants to get back for a Notre Dame game. Everyone would. So I'm that's a GPP play for me until I hear more on that. And then Michael Mayer, under 6K, is always in play. I hate their passing situation right now if they're going to run it that much. But if they get down to UNC and they have to throw the ball, I think he's going to get 10 to 12 targets easily. What are you thinking, Aaron? Where's your mind at?
Yeah, I like May a lot. I just cannot get how the spread's so short. I don't get how Notre Dame can keep up with UNC. So I like May and Downs a lot, especially with the Q tag still there. Hopefully it stays up there.
Yeah, for sure.
And then yeah, he's been a huge target guy whenever he's been healthy. And then the tight end Nesbitt, he's been impressive too. I don't know if I'd want to focus on the secondary receivers, but he's had some good games. And then I like Hampton a lot too.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to look at these stat sheets because they don't have the biggest game of the year for North Carolina on there. Which I kind of like because hopefully other people look at that and fade them.
Yeah.
Going over to Minnesota at Michigan State. Minnesota's favored by 3 with a 51.5 point total. Don't love either of these quarterbacks, even at their prices. They both look good here. Minnesota lost their top receiver, so I'm kind of fading that whole passing situation, which I normally do anyways. And then Minnesota has a good pass defense. Mo Ibrahim is always in play. That being said, at 9,400, I could see playing him against a Colorado defense that basically is air. Michigan State's a lot better than Colorado. At this price, he's going to have to get 35 to 40 DraftKings points to pay off that salary. And it's really hard to do. I mean, even last week he went off. Obviously, he was pulled early and he had 41.2 points. And I mean, look at that stat line. That's an absurd stat line. And you just get to where you need to be to pay off your salary. So I'm not going to have a ton of him. But, he is always in play. And if you can get him in your cash lineup, he's always a cash guy. If Jalen Reed is out here again, like I am expecting him to be, then I love loading up at this price on Keon Coleman. Last week he had 18 targets, I believe. He's going to get peppered with targets every week. He was leading the team in targets even before that when Reed was in. So he is somebody that I really love in this spot. The other guy that has had a little bit, I've heard some things about Spam Ford with
Auburn Bell's out.
But I mean, that's very much a GPP play for me. What are you looking at?
Yeah. Going off on the so Minnesota has some talent at receiver. But it's going to be hard to sort them out. Right, solid. Like as far as talent, right, solid. Brown Stevens is good, and who's the and Spanford. They're all good players, but it's going to be hard to trust until we see some sort of pecking order. Um, I don't know. I like Coleman too if we get no Reed, but it's tough because it's a late game
Yeah, it's
on
one
the
of those
slate.
things you got to figure out. There's several places I think you can look at to pivot, but you gotta look at that early. Going over to Indiana at Cincinnati. Cincinnati's actually favored here by 17 with a 57.5 point total. Um, I don't love a ton here. There's a few places I want to look. I don't like either of these quarterbacks right now. Kind of want to see what Bryant does, and I don't like Bazelak against the Cincy defense. Shivers is going to get some volume. We know I think he has 15, 15, and 20 carries in the 3 games this year. Cincinnati has a really good rush defense, so I don't want to go there. McClelland is, if they're going to feed him like they did, I love him. Um, he has 10 and 18. He's gone up every game. Those 18 carries at a cheap price last week. Indiana hasn't been great against the run this year. We saw what Chris Brown did to them a couple weeks ago. And, he's a guy that I think is kind of similar to that, built the same way, runs the same way, and could have a decent game. Going over to wide receiver, there are 2 FBS games this year. Tyler Scott has 20 targets. I don't think he's a guy that gets a ton of ownership. I do think he has upside here, especially with the spread. And then Cam Camper is the other guy I'm really on here. He has 43 targets through 3 games on the year. He's going to get peppered again. It's tough defense, but in PPR format, that volume is always great. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I like I don't know, Bryant's okay, not super excited about this game. I know last week McClellan did pretty well at running back. We have to, if Montgomery's out, I'll probably go back there. And then at receiver, yeah, I like Camper. Since he's tough because it's so concentrated right now with Scott and Tucker, there isn't much value there right now. Yeah, I don't know. Not the best game.
No, it's not a lot there. Last game on the slate, it's kind of the same way. Is Oregon going down to Wazoo? Oregon's favored by 6.5, and there's a 57.5 point total. I actually think Nix is in play here at this price. He's done decent this year. Like, you don't think that, and then you go and you look into the stats. That being said, it has been so touchdown dependent. Eastern Washington, he had 32 points, which is great. So you see 20 of those points were from touchdowns. Last week, he had the 38-point output against BYU until you see that 26 of those points are from touchdowns. If he's going to get you those touchdowns, then he's a great play. If you think he's going to get there at this price, but literally, I mean, that's what he is. He's got to get you those touchdowns to pay off, even that lower salary. There's not a ton I love at running back. I think Oregon has a really nice run defense. We saw that last week. And they rotate through running back so much, it's just hard to pinpoint where they're going. You want, Franklin is their tight end for Oregon. He has gotten decent target share, done all right. And then Franklin's a wide receiver. Ferguson is their tight end, and he is a big red zone target. He's a GPP pump play for me, but somebody that can, obviously has 2 touchdown upside. Has done it each of the last 2 weeks. So it's kind of you're playing for touchdowns here, but he will get targeted in the red zone. Yeah, it's kind of where I'm at. There are not a ton to really work with in this game. Anything you like here?
Yeah. At quarterback, Ward's always intriguing, and Nix did well too. I don't know. I wouldn't mind going back to Nix. I think he was at some of the top lineups last week. Looks like he's starting to get comfortable. Ward, we haven't had the huge game that I think a lot of people were expecting him to be this huge fantasy star. With he was like player of the year at the FCS level. And then the Washington State receivers are interesting. Stribling and Ollie. I think they're good punts even if you're not heavy on this game. I think they're still pretty interesting.
Yeah, Ollie's a guy that had a ton of volume, I know, and is a nice punt play for sure. Yeah, that's the main slate here. Why don't you give us a few of your top plays over at FanDuel, Aaron?
Let me open that up. Yeah, so the interesting thing about I like that McCarthy's a lot cheaper. Like he isn't QB1 or not QB. No, what is he like QB5 on DraftKings?
Yeah,
in
he's over
terms
there.
of
Let's
pricing.
see. On DraftKings, he is QB 5. Yeah.
So he's 9,100. So he's like cheaper than Thorne and Hartman and a bunch of guys, and he's the same price basically as Ward. So I think he's a really strong play on FanDuel. Smith, I'm willing to take another shot at. He's 8,500. And then I still like Ashford on both sites. Ashford's basically at the bottom, like he is on DraftKings, and then on the night slate, Braylon Allen's been priced down. He's only 8,500, so that's pretty interesting to me. The game environment sucks, but I'm still willing to take a chance at him. I like Shipley there too, even though Shipley's expensive. Hampton, same thing. I like Hampton a lot I like Hampton a lot. I like Eric Gray at Oklahoma. He's 7,400. We finally saw a big game out of him, and I think he'll be big for OU and Big 12 play. And then Miller's also cheap at 7,100. I like him. And that Bigsby too. Bigsby's 6,900, which is cheap for FanDuel. So there's you can definitely go mid-range and avoid Ibrahim and Bijan. The mid-range is really nice on FanDuel for running back. As far as receiver, let's see. Harrison's basically what WR2 here. He's expensive. I'm expecting Smith Najigba to have more of be more at full strength here. So I don't know. Ronnie Bell's kind of interesting if you want. He's like 7K. So if you want to stack McCarthy, I don't mind him. Calhoun's really cheap. He's 6,600, which I like, and it gives you a piece of the Duke Kansas game. we talked about him for DraftKings too. And then trying to look at the night games. Flowers is expensive, but he can have a nice game too. BC plays Florida State, and that's on the night slate. And then if we get word about, oh yeah, it looks like Stewart will be able to play. Evan Stewart at Texas A&M, he's their highly recruited freshman. He's 5,300 on FanDuel, so he's kind of interesting because it's a night slate game too. So have a pivot just in case, but I think he could go low owned.
Yeah, I know on the DraftKings night slate, Stewart. He was out last week. He was out past curfew the night before the game, so he was suspended for a game. But he's only 3,400 on that night slate on DraftKings. I love that. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks for your time, Aaron.
Yeah.
If y'all are looking to join a great team, head on over to DFS Army. Have a great college football team there. Me and Aaron have Catch running our Domination Station Optimizer, doing all of the behind-the-scenes stuff, and doing all of our projections. We have our cheat sheets every week. We have our Discord, which we're always breaking news in every day, especially close to the lock. And we also have we have NFL, we have all different sports. NBA is coming up. Had the Millie Maker winner on DraftKings last week in week 1 in the NFL. It just had a great year in all different sports. So head on over to dfsarmy.com and good luck this week. We hope to see you next week. Thanks.